It was the evening before Halloween, and all the engines were gathered round, ready and eager to start their annual tradition of telling ghost stories. The firelighter came to set the mood, and soon the yard had an atmosphere ripe for spooky tales. The engines took turns telling ghost stories as the moon rose overhead, each trying to outdo the last. Even the big engines, who normally didn't have much patience for silly stories, beamed and laughed as Thomas and Percy imitated a ghost haunting an old mansion. Finally, it was Henry's turn to tell a story. "Tell it," whispered Gordon. "Go on, it won't hurt." I don't know if I should," he whispered back. "It's up to you, Henry. It is scary." "Are you going to tell the story or not?" James said. The other engines laughed, except for Henry. "Come on," Thomas and Percy said together. "Well, all right. Here goes. Many years ago, there was an engine who worked on a faraway railway. He was never given a name, or should I say, never lived long enough to be given a name. You see," Henry continued, "all engines, when they are built, are friendly and hard-working. But once in a while, engines come out bad. And I'm sorry to say that this engine came out very bad indeed. No one knows how he came to be built or what led him to do the things he did. But he left a path of destruction that haunts his controller to this very day. The engine thought himself to be a premier engine from a famous lineage, but he was actually an experimental engine, only using parts of other steam engines. The parts didn't fit together very well and made him very mean-spirited and somewhat, dare I say, unhinged. He was painted blue. It probably should have been painted black. It was not uncommon for the engine to insult the others and resort to light sabotage, such as bumping them without warning and misplacing trains. There were small, petty squabbles. He was also easy to anger and had fits of rage, taking it out on the trucks, and sometimes engines smaller than he was. One day, buffered up to one of these smaller engines and pushed him to the edge of the turntable well, threatening to knock him in if he didn't cater to his every whim. Edward suddenly gulped, as if a bad memory had flashed across his mind. The big engines were furious and confronted him about his awful behavior. "Stop bullying engines smaller than you," they said. But he wouldn't listen. He continued to play spiteful tricks and threatened that if the big engines ever told the controller about it, he'd make them pay. The two big engines, thoroughly fed up, got up very early one morning and met the controller at the station. They told him all about what the engine had done, but the controller's hands were tied since the engine was on loan. "I can't do anything but put in a report to the engine's company," said Henry, mimicking the fictional controller. "What happened then?" asked Toby. "Well, one of the big engines left to take a train, and the other remained at the station, trying desperately to plead their case. It is said that the bad engine was passing through the yard at the time and saw the big engine. Needless to say, he was immediately suspicious. He confronted the big engine in the yard and said, 'I told you not to tell anyone. You'll get yours.' The big engine just laughed, believing the engine only to be bluffing. But, Henry said, he was most assuredly not bluffing. The next day, the big engine was pulling an express train through the junction, and suddenly, without warning, The bad engine, knowing the big engine was just up the line, had intentionally missed a signal and plowed into the back of the express train. To get even! The sight of it was awful! The 3 rear coaches were smashed to smithereens, and everyone inside those coaches... Everyone inside those 3 coaches perished. The other engines gasped. The big engine screamed, "You killed my passengers! You killed my passengers!" But the bad engine didn't care. He just laughed. The controller came, and seeing the mess, sent the engine for scrap. If the controller had only listened to the big engines, the lives of those in the coaches might have been saved. And so that is the moral of this story. Stand up to evil and fight until the very end, or the evil just might turn you into ghosts.
Wow, Henry, James laughed. That was a twisted story. I might have to keep the light on tonight, said Percy. And everyone laughed. Soon the engines began to leave the yard and get a good night's rest. Gordon, Henry, and Edward, however, stayed behind. And as soon as the others were out of earshot, Henry sighed.
A fine performance, Henry, Gordon smiled sympathetically. Though I know that's not an easy story for you to tell.
Do you think they knew who you were talking about? Asked Edward.
The only one who might have known was Thomas, but he was too young at that time to remember, added Gordon. You think 98462 was actually scrapped? Asked Henry.
But Gordon and Edward didn't answer right away.
The 3 looked up at the moon, feeling uncertain but hopeful that the bad engine wouldn't come back to haunt them again.